Hi, this is Dr. Cindy Banyai, Democratic candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, Florida 19, and this is Perspective on Lee Pitts Live. This segment, we're going to be talking about immigration. Immigrants are people. As Americans, most of us came from somewhere else. 98% of the people in the U.S. have roots from outside of the country. Our families moved here on their own or were brought here. We were founded as a nation of immigrants. So how did we come to develop so many challenges when it comes to immigration? Let's look at some realities in immigration, the situation at our southern border, and our policies. According to Pew Research, the U.S. has more immigrants than any other country in the world. 40 million people in the United States are born in another country. That's 1/5 of the world's immigrant population. Immigration in the U.S. has been growing since a change to the formalized immigration system in 1965 with the passing of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Now 13.7% of Americans are immigrants, compared to only 4.8% in 1970. But that's not the highest that it's been in our history. In 1890, we had 14.8% of the population in the United States that were immigrants. Now we look at our immigration population with 77% of the people who are here legally, and about 23% have otherwise unauthorized or undocumented status. Around 45% of the immigrants are naturalized citizens after having spent a time here in the United States. 10% of all immigrants in the United States live right here in Florida. That's over 4 million people, with concentrations in Miami, Tampa, and Orlando. 25% of all immigrants in the United States hail from Mexico. That's around 11.2 million people. We have about 6% of our immigrants coming from China and India, respectively, with about 3 million people each from those countries. We have another 2 million people coming from the Philippines and another 1.5 million coming from El Salvador. Although we have people coming from all countries around the world, these are the top places that people who are immigrants to the United States are hailing from. Additionally, immigrants are important in our workforce. They make up about 17% of our workforce. That's over 21 million people who have legal authorization to work in the United States. But there are about 7 million people who have unauthorized work status that are part of our workforce here in the United States. They are filling the ranks in agriculture, hospitality, food service, and construction. Those are things that are important right here in Southwest Florida. 66% of Americans believe immigrants make the United States stronger because of their hard work and their talents. Unfortunately, less than a quarter of people in the United States think immigrants are not good for the country because they take housing and jobs. This, of course, is part of the divisive nature in politics we have in the country at this time, because these ideologies are split heavily along party lines. When we think about immigrants, we must also consider refugees. Who are refugees? Refugees are defined by the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980. They are people who are outside of their country, unwilling or unable to return to their home country, and able to demonstrate persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Asylum seekers, otherwise known as asylees, are people who are entering the United States at one of our ports of entry, either a physical land border or flying into the United States, and they are able to meet that refugee definition. Refugees are people who are in distress, and we absolutely need to take care of them in this country. Refugees are ebb and flow in this country based on historic events such as unrest and natural disasters. Texas, Washington, New York, California all receive the most amount of refugees in this country. Just recently, President Joe Biden raised the number of refugees that can enter the United States into 125,000 a year in the year 2022. This is a huge increase from the historically low number of 15,000 that President Trump had allowed in. Sadly, once again, only 51% of Americans say the U.S. has a responsibility to accept refugees into this country, and this is split by party, showing our divisiveness once again. Actually, historically speaking, Americans are not very welcoming to refugees despite their dire need. Americans push back against large resettlements of people fleeing war and oppression. Only 34% of Americans approved of resettlements after the Vietnam War in 1979, and only 25% of Americans approved of accepting Cuban refugees in 1980. Opinions on refugees have been improving over the years, with the majority of people approving resettlement of ethnic Albanians in the late 90s and Syrians a few years ago. Now, according to an NPR ISPAS poll, 70% of Americans approve of accepting refugees who worked with the U.S. in Afghanistan after the most recent end of the 20 years war with Afghanistan and the United States ending their engagement there. Migrants from Afghanistan have now started to enter into our country, one of whom was a classmate of mine at Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University. And it is a personal issue for me and like many folks in our community. Let's talk briefly about the border situation because this has been a hot topic as well. In July 2021, we saw 200,000 encounters, not just individuals, at the border between the United States and Mexico. This is the highest in 20 years, and these resulted in expulsion, mostly under the pandemic protocol Title 42. Since 2014, most of the border apprehensions at the southern border are non-Mexicans, mostly people coming from Central America. According to the U.S. Justice Department, Trump's zero tolerance policy at the border led to family separations. The zero tolerance policy in the summer of 2018 led to long-term separation of nearly 3,000 children, of which there are still 303 still separated from their families that have not been found. This led to global outreach and local battles to stop these inhumane practices by organizations like the ACLU. According to the Associated Press, in September, a camp of 14,000 migrants, originally from Haiti, moved through South and Central America in an attempt to gain access as an asylum in the United States. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security began to disperse the camp. We saw horrific pictures of officers on horseback chasing black migrants with ropes. This led to the deportation of hundreds of Haitians back to Haiti rather than the country that they were residing in under Title 42 once again. The vast majority of immigrants and other advocates have been released into the United States, have been young families with children and pregnant women. The Biden administration implored additional people not to come. So we do have a crisis that is continuing to go on in the southern border, and there are policies that are trying to turn them back as well as help the people who need it. Additionally, the United States must abide by the Geneva Convention. This is what set up the status for refugees back in 1951. We should not be sending people back to their country when they face serious threat to life or freedom. We have a legal and moral obligation to help people who are at risk in this country. In Florida, we also have the Department of Children and Family Services Refugees Program that helps more than 5,000 refugees, asylum seekers, and Cuban and Haitian entrants into Florida each year. These folks have legal status here in Florida, and 80% of them are Cubans, and 25% of them are children under the age of 19. They are provided with cash assistance and medical assistance right here in Florida, and this is something that we should continue to do. We also have folks coming into the country with temporary protected status. And just recently, the 300,000 temporary protected status folks hailing from the countries of El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, and Sudan were granted a 15-month extension on their services. And I definitely believe that we need to encourage that and continue the temporary protected status, as well as provide for permanent residency and a pathway to citizenship for those folks as well as anybody else, including our DACA Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which has faced some legal challenges but affects 8 million people brought to the United States as children. So in conclusion, immigration is a dear issue to me as somebody who spent 8 years in Taiwan and Japan as an immigrant themselves, as well as researching and working with immigrant communities here in Southwest Florida. It's all about treating migrants as people. We need more humanitarian approach to the border situation. No more cowboys with lassos terrorizing migrants. No more Title 42 expulsions. No more family separations. We need an improved system for accepting and processing asylum seekers at the border. We need a more streamlined and humane immigration system to keep the workforce and talent of immigrants in the United States. There should always be a pathway to citizenship for people who want to pursue the American dream and live peacefully in American society. Those worrying about immigrants taking jobs and housing need to recognize the abundance in America and recognize that we are better together. This is Dr. Cindy Banyai, Democratic candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, Florida 19, and this has been Perspective on Lee Pitts Live. Now back to Lee Pitts. I'm Dr. Cindy Banyai, Democratic candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, Florida Congressional District 19. I'm a teacher and small business owner. I'm fighting for the things we need: clean water, good health, and good jobs. I'm here with you and for you. Let's create a Southwest Florida where the sun shines on everyone. Send me to Congress to work for you. Check your voter registration and vote for me, Dr. Cindy Banyai.
I'm Dr. Cindy Banyai, and I approve this message.
Lee Pitts Live is a Lee Pitts Enterprise production.
Hello everybody, this is Lee. I'm so glad that you watched that particular show, and if you enjoyed that show, we got other shows like that. Just subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch Lee Pitts Live on demand anytime, and also hit us up on all our social media platforms. Just type in Lee Pitts Live, and there you go.